Jessica Turner was a woman who seemed to have everything: an accomplished career, a loving family, and the admiration of those around her. At just 29, she had already made history as one of the youngest judges in Texas, earning a reputation for her sharp intellect and unwavering commitment to justice. In the courtroom, she was known for her fairness and decisiveness, delivering rulings with an authority that few dared to question. Outside of work, she appeared to have a perfect life: a stable marriage with Dr. Joshua Turner, a highly respected surgeon, and 2 wonderful children, Mary and Wayne. Their home, a grand estate in an affluent neighborhood, reflected their social status and wealth. To the world, Jessica was a role model, an embodiment of success, intelligence, and grace. However, behind closed doors, she was anything but the ideal woman she portrayed. Beneath the surface of her carefully constructed image lurked a dark and twisted obsession, one that would ultimately unravel everything she had built. Jessica's life took an unexpected turn 5 years earlier when tragedy struck their family. A fatal car accident claimed the lives of her parents, leaving behind her younger brother, Jason, who was only 13 at the time. With no one else to care for him, Jessica stepped in as his legal guardian, bringing him into her home. At first, her decision was seen as an act of love and responsibility. She provided Jason with everything he could possibly need: an elite education, luxurious comforts, and the security of a stable home. However, what started as genuine care soon morphed into something far more disturbing. Jessica's love became suffocating, her guidance turned into control, and her authority over Jason's life became absolute. She decided what he wore, who he talked to, and even what he was allowed to think. Jason, still grieving the loss of their parents, initially saw his sister's strictness as an expression of concern. But as the years passed, he began to feel like a prisoner in his own home, unable to make choices for himself. As Jason grew older, the bond between him and Jessica took on an unnatural and unsettling form. What had once been the protective affection of an older sister began to shift into something far more sinister. Jessica's control over Jason intensified, going beyond simple guardianship. She isolated him from his peers, ensuring he spent all his time with her. When he showed interest in dating, she discouraged him, convincing him that no one could ever love or understand him the way she did. The physical interactions between them also changed. Jessica's touches lingered longer than they should have. She would stroke his hair, hold him tightly, and call him her special boy in ways that made Jason increasingly uncomfortable. At night, Jason would wake to find Jessica in his room, sitting on the edge of his bed, watching him as he slept. Though she never outright stated her intentions, Jason began to sense something was deeply wrong. The love he once trusted felt oppressive, unnatural, and inescapable. By the time Jason turned 18, he had become a shadow of his former self. The once vibrant and hopeful boy had grown quiet, withdrawn, and emotionally exhausted. He had tried to fight back in subtle ways, avoiding Jessica when he could, refusing to talk about his personal life, and attempting to establish small boundaries. But every attempt was met with Jessica's unrelenting manipulation. If he pulled away, she would guilt him, reminding him that she had sacrificed everything to care for him. If he insisted on independence, she would cry, making him feel as if he was betraying her love. Unable to seek help, Jason buried his emotions, hiding his suffering behind forced smiles and quiet obedience. His diary became the only place where he could express his true feelings. In its pages, he wrote about his fear, his confusion, and his growing realization that Jessica's love was not normal. He knew he needed to escape, but the question remained: how? The situation reached its breaking point one night in late 2023. That evening, Jason had made a decision: he was going to leave. He had packed a small bag, prepared to sneak out while the house was quiet. But Jessica, as if sensing his intentions, appeared at his bedroom door before he could make his move. What followed was a tense confrontation. She demanded to know why he was acting distant, why he was trying to run from her. Jason, his voice shaking, told her the truth, that he felt trapped, that he needed to live his own life, that her love was suffocating him. Jessica's expression darkened. In that moment, the mask of the perfect sister and respected judge slipped away, revealing something cold and terrifying. She told Jason that he belonged to her, that no one else could have him. And then, in a chilling whisper, she made it clear, if he left, she would destroy him. Jason realized, perhaps too late, that his sister was far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. And as the night stretched on, he understood that escaping her grasp would not be easy. The only question was, how far would Jessica go to keep him under her control? Jason knew that if he wanted to break free from Jessica's control, he had to be careful. His last attempt to leave had only confirmed how far she was willing to go to keep him trapped. He realized that running away in the middle of the night wouldn't work. Jessica was too watchful, too controlling. She had already tightened her grip, monitoring his every move and questioning his every decision. His phone, his bank account, even his social life were all under her control. He had no financial independence, no close friends he could confide in. But Jason wasn't willing to give up. He began to look for small opportunities, secretly stashing money, memorizing routes out of town, and looking for allies who might help him. But Jessica, sharp and manipulative as ever, noticed even the slightest change in his behavior. Whenever he seemed distant or distracted, she would find ways to remind him of her power. She would show up unannounced at his school, calling him home early. She would guilt-trip him, crying about how much she had sacrificed for him. And when all else failed, she would subtly threaten him, reminding him that she was a respected judge, and that, if she wanted to, she could make his life a living nightmare. Jason felt like a caged animal, desperate but powerless. He knew that one wrong move could cost him everything. As Jason struggled to find a way out, Jessica's obsession with him became even more intense. She began setting new rules, imposing stricter curfews, and demanding to know his every move. She insisted that they spend more time together, treating him not as a younger brother, but as something much more. She started bringing up how they were meant to be together, that no one in the world would ever understand him the way she did. Jason could see the delusion in her eyes. She wasn't just controlling him, she was obsessed with him. The worst part was that no one around them seemed to suspect the truth. To the outside world, Jessica was the same brilliant, respectable judge, and Jason was just a quiet, well-mannered young man living under her care. No one saw the way she touched his arm a little too long, the way she looked at him with something far beyond sisterly affection, the way she seemed to get jealous when he so much as spoke to another woman. Jason wanted to scream, to tell someone what was happening, but who would believe him? Jessica had built a flawless image for herself. Who would believe the words of a teenage boy over the testimony of a powerful judge? Just when Jason was beginning to lose hope, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, he found an envelope slipped under his bedroom door. There was no name, no return address, just a single piece of paper with a short but chilling message. I know what she's doing to you. If you want to escape, be ready at midnight. Jason's heart pounded as he read the words over and over. Who had written this? Could he trust them? Was it a trap? He knew Jessica had the power to manipulate and deceive. What if this was just another one of her cruel games? But deep inside, he felt a flicker of hope. Someone else knew. Someone had seen the truth. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he thought. That night, he stayed awake, waiting anxiously. Midnight came and went, but no one arrived. Had he been fooled? Or was this person out there, watching, waiting for the right moment? Jason's paranoia grew. If Jessica found out about this note, she would never let him out of her sight again. Days passed, and Jason continued to wait for another sign, another message, but nothing came. Then, just as he was beginning to believe the letter had been a cruel joke, Jessica confronted him. She held the crumpled paper in her hands, her face a mask of fury. Jason felt his stomach drop. Someone had betrayed him. Someone had told Jessica about the note. The moment he saw the look in her eyes, he knew he was in danger. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. Instead, she spoke in a calm, eerie voice, telling him that there was no escape, that he was hers and no one could change that. Then, in a move that sent pure terror through Jason, she leaned in and whispered, "You should know by now, I always win." That night, Jason felt truly hopeless. Whoever had tried to help him was gone, and Jessica's grip on him was tighter than ever. His only chance at freedom had slipped through his fingers. After the betrayal, Jessica tightened her control in ways Jason hadn't thought possible. She took away his phone, limited his access to the internet, and even stopped him from attending certain classes. She made it clear that he was completely at her mercy. But something inside Jason had changed. He was no longer just afraid, he was furious. He had spent years being manipulated, controlled, and trapped in a twisted relationship he never wanted. And now, after coming so close to freedom, he was done playing the obedient little brother. He didn't care if it was dangerous. He didn't care if Jessica was powerful. He had to escape. But he knew one thing. If he wanted to get out, he had to outsmart Jessica at her own game. He had to be patient, careful, and willing to do whatever it took. Because now he understood the truth. Jessica wasn't just controlling. She was dangerous. And if he made one wrong move, he might not live to see freedom at all. Jason knew he couldn't escape by force. Jessica was too powerful, too careful. If he tried to run, she would find him. If he tried to fight back, she would destroy him. His only option was to outthink her, to make her believe that she had won while he quietly planned his escape. So, he did something that went against every instinct in his body. He pretended to surrender. He stopped resisting. He became more obedient, more affectionate, more like the version of Jason that Jessica wanted him to be. He let her think she had broken him. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Every time she touched him, every time she whispered possessive words in his ear, every time she reminded him that he belonged to her, he had to suppress his disgust and rage. But he played his role perfectly. Slowly, Jessica began to trust him again. She loosened her grip, allowing him small freedoms, his phone back, longer hours outside the house, even letting him visit a few friends. Jason acted grateful, always making sure to thank her, to reassure her that he was hers. But behind his mask, he was planning. Every smile, every kind word, every fake moment of affection was a step toward his freedom. He had learned his lesson. Jessica was too strong to fight head-on. If he wanted to win, he had to let her believe she had already won. Jason knew he couldn't do this alone. He needed help, but finding someone he could trust was dangerous. Jessica had already proven that she had eyes everywhere. The last time someone tried to help him, they had disappeared without a trace. But then, something unexpected happened. One day at school, a girl named Emily approached him. She was quiet, observant, and had never paid much attention to him before. But that day, she slipped him a small note when no one was watching. "I know the truth. You're not alone." Jason's heart pounded as he read the words. Was this another trap? Or was she really someone who could help him? He didn't have a choice. He had to take the risk. Over the next few weeks, Jason and Emily began communicating in secret. He never spoke directly about Jessica, but Emily understood. She had been watching him for months, noticing the little things, how he never made plans, how he always looked over his shoulder, how he never seemed truly free. She told him that she had connections, people who could help him disappear. Jason felt hope for the first time in years. But they had to be careful. If Jessica even suspected that he was planning something, she would never let him out of her sight again. Jason and Emily worked carefully, creating a plan that had to be flawless. Emily's contacts had connections with safe houses, people who specialized in helping victims of abuse disappear without a trace. The plan was simple but risky. Jason would fake an emergency during one of his allowed outings, slipping away before Jessica could react. He would meet Emily's contact at a hidden location where he would be given new identification, a new life. But there was one major problem. Jessica was already growing suspicious. She had started questioning him again, testing him, searching his phone when he wasn't looking. Jason knew she could sense something was different. He had to act fast. The escape was set for Friday night, when he was supposed to be at a school event. Emily would cover for him, making sure Jessica didn't realize he was gone until it was too late. Everything was in place. But Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something would go wrong. Jessica wasn't just manipulative, she was dangerous. If she found out what he was planning, she wouldn't just punish him. She would make sure he never got the chance to run again. And Jason knew, deep down, that if this plan failed, he might not survive to try again. Jessica Turner had spent years mastering the art of control. In the courtroom, she held absolute authority, dictating the fates of those who stood before her. At home, she was the architect of an elaborate illusion, a loving wife, a devoted mother, a sister-turned-guardian. But on the night of June 18th, 2023, all of that unraveled. She was no longer the powerful judge, the untouchable figure of justice. She was a woman trapped by her own monstrosity, desperate, cornered, and willing to do the unthinkable to keep her dark secrets buried forever. The fire had been her final solution. It was meant to erase everything: the evidence, the bodies, the memories. Flames, she believed, were the ultimate destroyer. They could reduce even the most damning truths to ash. But fire, unpredictable and uncontrollable, had not worked as perfectly as she had planned. Investigators combed through the remains of the Turner home, expecting to find nothing but destruction. Instead, they found traces of something more sinister, bodies that bore marks inconsistent with death by fire. Joshua Turner, her husband, hadn't perished in the flames. He had been stabbed multiple times before the fire had even started. The autopsy revealed defensive wounds on his arms, indicating a struggle. He had fought for his life. The children, Mary, Wayne, and Jason, hadn't succumbed to smoke inhalation as initially assumed. Their lungs showed no signs of carbon monoxide poisoning, meaning they had died before the fire ever touched them. Mary and Wayne had been suffocated, their death silent and methodical. Jason's cause of death was similar, but there was something even more disturbing. His body showed evidence of prolonged abuse, marks that told a story of manipulation, control, and a twisted kind of possession. The fire may have been meant to conceal everything, but instead, it had drawn attention to the crime. For Jessica, the days following the fire were a whirlwind of carefully calculated performances. She played the grieving widow, the devastated mother, and the heartbroken sister. She appeared at press conferences, her face pale and hollow, her voice trembling as she spoke of her unbearable loss. Cameras captured her tears, her hands shaking as she held on to reporters for support. But behind closed doors, she was far from broken. She was watching, waiting, calculating her next move. She knew she had to tread carefully. There were too many variables, too many eyes on her. Investigators were already beginning to question her version of events. Her alibi was weak. She claimed she had gone for a late-night drive, yet security cameras in the neighborhood placed her at home during the crucial hours. The inconsistencies were piling up, but Jessica had spent a lifetime manipulating the truth. She had crafted airtight arguments in the courtroom, twisting narratives in her favor. She believed she could do the same now. She was confident, almost arrogant, in her ability to outmaneuver those who sought to bring her down. Then, the police found Jason's journal. Jason's journal was the key that unlocked everything. It wasn't just the confessions of a troubled teenage boy, it was a damning record of Jessica's descent into pure, calculated evil. His words painted a portrait of a boy trapped in a nightmare he couldn't escape, a boy who had once idolized his sister, but had come to fear her more than anything. The entries were filled with desperate, terrified thoughts. She watches me all the time. I can't breathe when she's near me. I don't know what she wants from me anymore, but I know it isn't right. I want to run, but I have nowhere to go. She says she loves me. She says I belong to her. But love isn't supposed to feel like this. Love isn't supposed to make me sick. I told her we need to stop. She smiled and said there's no turning back now. I think I might be trapped forever. And then, the final entry, written the night before the murders. She told me today. She said she's pregnant. I wanted to scream. I told her we have to tell someone. She said no. She said no one would understand. I feel like I'm going to be sick. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to escape this. I think she's going to hurt me. When the police read these words, everything changed. Jessica Turner was no longer the grieving victim of a tragic fire. She was the prime suspect in a horror beyond imagination. The arrest came swiftly. Jessica was brought in for questioning on June 22nd, 2023, just 4 days after the fire. At first, she played the part of the distraught widow, the shattered mother. She gasped in disbelief when detectives suggested she might be involved. She shook her head, tears spilling down her face. "How dare you?" she whispered. "How dare you accuse me of this? I lost my family. I lost everything." But the detectives weren't moved. They had seen real grief before. This wasn't it. They laid the evidence before her: Joshua's stab wounds, the lack of smoke inhalation in the children's bodies, the security footage that placed her at home, and, most damning of all, Jason's journal. For the first time in her life, Jessica Turner had nothing to say. When she finally spoke, it wasn't in denial. It wasn't in defense. It was in chilling, detached acceptance. "I had to," she said simply. There was no other way. Her confession wasn't filled with remorse or regret. It was cold, methodical, a step-by-step recounting of her crimes as if she were listing evidence in a trial. "I knew Joshua had found the videos," she explained. "I knew he had proof. He was going to destroy everything I worked for. He was going to destroy everything I worked for. He had to die first." She detailed how she had waited for him to come home, how she had poured him a drink, how she had plunged the knife into his back before he could even turn around. She described the way his body had shuddered, the way he had tried to speak before she silenced him forever. She spoke about Jason next, not as a brother, but as a possession she had lost control over. "He wanted to leave," she said. "He wanted to tell. I couldn't let him." She described climbing on top of him, pressing the pillow down over his face as he thrashed beneath her. She described how his hands had fought against her, how he had tried so desperately to hold on. Then, her children. They would have asked questions, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. They would have been a liability. And so, one by one, she snuffed out their lives, ensuring that when morning came, there would be nothing left to unravel. She thought the fire would destroy the truth, but the truth had already survived. Jessica Turner was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She was placed in a maximum security facility where she would spend the rest of her days surrounded by the very criminals she had once judged from the bench. In the end, the woman who had spent her life wielding power had lost everything. Her name became synonymous with horror. The Turner home was demolished, leaving behind an empty lot, a void where once a family had thrived. And Jason Turner, the boy who had never been able to escape, remained a ghost in the minds of those who learned his story. Jessica Turner had built her life on control, but in the end, it was her own darkness that consumed her.